Hello, you are listening to the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. Thanks again for listening or downloading. I am your host, Neil Horowitz. You can find me on Twitter, NJH287, also on LinkedIn, where I post more content. Hit me up there. The website is dsmsports.net, where you can find every episode and more content. And of course, the podcast is available on your preferred podcast platform. Really awesome show for you guys today. I was so psyched to be able to speak with this guest. Really one of the smartest folks in sports business. I learned so much. The guest on the podcast today is Corey Leff. He is the founder and editor of JohnWallStreet, a newsletter, a daily newsletter during the week. If you are not following JohnWallStreet, you definitely should be. It has truly taught me so much about the sports business space. Covers the major themes and trends and deals in the greater sports business industry, the stuff that the owners are reading, as you'll hear about in this interview with Corey. Just so much good stuff. And you're going to learn a lot today. So listen up. Here is Corey Leff, founder and editor of JohnWallStreet. Right back with today's guest, and I'm so psyched to have this conversation today. Every time I read what he has to write, every time I talk to him, I just learn so much. My guest on the podcast today is Corey Leff. He is founder and editor of JohnWallStreet. If you're in the sports business space, you have definitely heard of JohnWallStreet. And welcome to the podcast today, Corey.
Thanks for having me, bud.
Really looking forward to picking your brain. I almost just want to call you JohnWallStreet because I've just known you by that moniker for so many years now, being a long-time reader. But I'm so psyched to learn more about you and also learn everything about you, about your knowledge of the sports business space. Have a great conversation. But before we get into it, tell us about your background. How'd you get into this space? Your stops along the way, and any tips for folks that want to try to do what you do?
Well, start putting out content. That's the advice. If you want to break into sports, and it's not going to be good content at the beginning, I promise. But it will get better over time. I started initially. I was working in the equity research space when I started JohnWallStreet. I'd seen the money starting to get big in sports, but the coverage at the time was pretty limited. I mean, you had SBJ, but other than SBJ, it was really just Bloomberg that was covering sports from a deal perspective, and everything was really news focused. Very little from an analytical or context perspective, which is frankly where I think most of the value is. So I started to just kind of cover deals, trends, things that I thought were noteworthy and important in the sports and media landscape, and slowly but surely started to build an influential audience, which gave me access to those people, because newsletter is kind of the one-to-one direct-to-consumer communication. I knew exactly who was signing up, who was reading, and was able to go out and connect with those people and build relationships. And obviously that's allowed me to put better content out over time, and which has spawned into more readership. And here we are 6 years later. So, but it all starts with putting out content and writing that first piece or that first podcast or that first video.
And as you got into this, how did you just stumble into, I feel like now the last few years, everyone has a newsletter. I mean, I don't, maybe I should. Was it just obvious that newsletter is the way to go as opposed to trying to, work for a CNBC or a Bloomberg or whatever it might be?
Yeah, it's that's a good question. At first, I didn't know, to be honest, what the end goal was. I thought maybe I would replace like Darren Ravel at ESPN, or do something like that. I remember though, very early on, I had a conversation with Rob King, and Rob was an early reader and believer in JohnWallStreet. And he's like, "I love you, and I love what you're doing. We will never cover sports business again at ESPN because the fan just doesn't care." And that it was something that I took to heart. I didn't take that in a negative way, but I realized who the audience was. You're not writing for the fan, and if you think that sports business is a volume game or a mass media play, you're wrong. But period, you're wrong. It's not. So if you look at it through that, if you understand that, then you start to focus, well, who's the core audience? The core audience are the people who matter in sports. That's your team owners, your league commissioners, the people that run the media networks, your PEs, your VCs. Okay, well, those people aren't on social media. Those people don't go to websites. So you deliver media using a mechanism that they consume, which is email. And so It's actually a very easy and logical solution if you think about it that way.
So when you're thinking about like the numbers of fans you're reaching, I mean the obvious like in this age of digital and social, it's so easy to chase after the vanity measures and go after hundreds of thousands of impressions and followers, subscribers. But for you, it might be nice to have 1 million subscribers to your newsletter, but at the end of the day, you'd be happy with 500 if it meant that 150 owners and big players in the sports investment space were among that audience.
You're 100% right. I used to get very bummed about this, to be honest with you. I remember like I got started like right about the same time as Front Office Sports. I think they maybe even started a little bit before me, but they were growing so much faster. And I'm like, I don't understand this. My content is so much better. Like, why? It took me a long time to realize that we weren't writing for the same audience. Joe Favorito helped put it in context for me too. I remember, I mean, JohnWallStreet had to have been maybe 2 or 3 months old. Chelsea was in town. I don't even remember why at this point. But I remember we went to an event and Joe introduced me to, I don't know who it was, the president of Chelsea or whatever at the time. And he said, this guy writes the most influential newsletter in sports business. And I laughed and I said, Joe, that's very nice of you to say. I have 300 subscribers. And he goes, yeah, but it's the 300 people in sports that matter. And that reshaped kind of my whole thinking about it. I don't need 1 million subscribers, as you say. I needed 100 subscribers. If I could get the 100 pro sports team owners, the big four sports team owners to read me every single day, I literally don't need another reader. I don't care if anybody else reads.
And was there a path? And we'll get more into the sports business stuff, of course. But I'm interested in just the idea of this newsletter and the business of it. Because at the end of the day, like there are bills to pay and whatnot. Like you look at the subscription for SBJ, for example. It's not insignificant. It's pretty big, and a lot of companies will cover it for their employees at times. So like you could have charged, who knows, $1,000 a month, $1,000 a year, $10,000 a year, but the newsletter is free. It remains free. So how did that enter into the picture early on, and even today, as you think about monetizing JohnWallStreet?
Well, I think the issue you run into is that to write the kinds of content, a really smart newsletter that reaches the people, the high-end audience, as soon as you start dumbing it down to reach the masses, you lose those people, right? So you don't want to do that. But the problem is like you just said, everybody's chasing clicks because they're usually or often ad based, right? So they need the numbers. When I started JohnWallStreet, I had a full-time job, so I didn't need to generate revenue from the newsletter. So and frankly, honestly, I didn't know how I was going to monetize the newsletter, if it ever was going to get to that point. The only goal at the beginning was let's build audience. Let's build influential audience. And if we can get influential people to read this thing, we'll figure out how to monetize it later. And now is later. But it took a while to kind of figure out where the business was going. But it all stems from having the influence. It's having the people who matter and having their ear and access to them, and then having their respect for them to pick up the phone or to read your email. That's all part of it too.
And as you think about just going back to, I guess, the evolution of your own interest in the sports business space, what, like, growing up, even like, was sports business still a bit of this like old school money, like generational wealth, and not so much like, was there a turning point wherein all of a sudden like these high level like venture capitalists came in, or these hedge fund billionaires came in and started really treating it like a business to drive huge multiples, as opposed to something as like they're a custodian of a public good almost?
For sure. Well, first of all, on my own personal interest, I grew up as a fanatical sports fan. I thought I wanted to be Mike Francesa. I wanted to talk about the game. As I got older, I realized the game is just not that interesting most of the time. And actually, that's a lot of what I've tried to hone in on is, okay, well, the game isn't that interesting. I've been to hundreds, if not thousands, of sporting events in my life. The amount that I could remember the outcome of, never mind like a single play or anything, is on like one hand, maybe two hands. The kickoff, the punt return of the Rodgers game, the opener, the Jets opener this year, is like literally like one of the only times I could ever remember the outcome of a Jet game I attended. Because it was something that was so out of the ordinary, right? Like, a walk-off touchdown in the game Rodgers gets hurt at. Most of the time, the game isn't that interesting. So it becomes like, okay, well, how do you get fans to come back? And so a lot of what I think about on a day-to-day basis is like fan experience and, why do people come to the stadium and how can you get them to leave thinking that this was an amazing experience, regardless of whether or not the home team won or the game was any good.
Yeah.
Because again, most of the time it's not. Looking at and sports, the business side of sports has gotten much more interesting. So as I realized that the game isn't as interesting as I thought it once was, the business side has also become far more interesting than it ever was. As late as the mid 2000s, like pro sports teams were going for like a few $100 million. Like you could buy NBA teams in the late 2000s. Like I think the Hawks sold for like $300-400 million in like the late 2000s, right? Like not, and maybe my numbers are off there, but we're not. Generally speaking, that's pretty accurate. So it's only the last like 15 years that we're talking about teams being worth billions of dollars, where it becomes like really a viable investment class. Forever, sports was just like a hobby that rich people did. And these weren't investments. These were largely teams that were passed down, right? But as the valuations, which have corresponded with media rights, right, have skyrocketed over the last 15 years, you've had a different class of owner come in because who can afford to buy $2 billion teams, right? And with these enormous purchase prices, you get this different class of owner that's taking a different approach and making sports business a lot smarter and are thinking about things like the fan experience and how to improve and integrate sports tech. And so that's opened up to this whole world of venture and investment and all the things that we write about now.
Yeah, I'm gonna have you indulge me for a moment too, and because I think everyone that's worked in and around sports, there's a time when all of a sudden going to a game becomes a different experience. You can't watch it the same way. You're looking at, oh, what are they doing here? Or look at how they're integrating this experience, or they're having this second screen, or doing this engagement. Like, what's your experience like of attending a game now? What are you paying attention to? What are you looking at all the way from egress to ingress? Or vice versa, rather.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually I've been for a long time wanting to do a podcast with my wife and daughter about this, about the fan experience and looking at the game through the perspective of the three different perspectives, right? Like me as like a fanatical sports fan who's going, but also as like a dad and husband. And then my wife who's looking at like totally different things. She's looking about like kid-friendly bathrooms and like, things like that. And then my daughter who's like, concerned about mascots and like, I've always thought that this could be like a fun family type of podcast, and maybe at some time I'll have enough time to do that. But I am looking at all those things that you just kind of referenced. It is certainly a different experience. I mean, don't get me wrong. I still love to go to sporting events. I go to sporting events all the time. I try to get to one a week, like if I can, at least. I still like to go as a fan, and I'm certainly, interested in what happens on the field or the ice or whatever. But I'm, I'm also, I pay attention to exactly what you just said. I mean, the parking and the bathroom situation and, I guess all the normal things. But I pay attention to like the game presentation now. I came home from the Jets opener and I texted Joe Fab about how I thought the game presentation was really well done. And so yeah, I think it's all of those things. I don't know. It's probably not the greatest answer, but yeah.
Totally. I get everyone that works in the space. You have that change, that perspective change, where you can't help it now.
I actually think the biggest change for me is that I'm looking for a spectacle now. That's actually what I like the best. That's probably the biggest change for me is that going because I'm afforded the opportunity to go so often. The things that I really like are not necessarily the best sporting event or the biggest game. Like game seven, great. Like that's amazing. It's a great sporting event. But for me, like the Kentucky Derby or like a spectacle is more exciting. Like I like that more than anything else. And so, yeah, I don't know. I like the big event feel.
Let's actually dive into that. I wasn't necessarily planning to go in this direction, but I think we've seen in the past few years in particular, and maybe even before that, there's been more. The idea of going to a game has become more of an entertainment experience and less just about we're going to go see who wins the game tonight. Whether it's we're going to go and try this new food they have, or hey, I mean, where I'm in San Diego in Petco Park, they have a kids field where you can go play wiffle ball with other kids, and that's another reason to go to the ballpark. Or maybe you're going to see a musical performance before or after the game, or there's always different things. Or maybe you're going to go check out all the different beers they have on tap from around the city. So like is the game still I mean, the game still is probably the number one attraction, but what have you seen among the other reasons to get fans to come to a game, especially in these teams that have 40 games, or even in baseball, of course, 80 games to sell, and it's hard to tell could just coming to see a ball game every single time.
Um, I do love the integration of music, of live music. I think that, it's not necessarily new, but you know, putting a concert around the big fight or a basketball game. I love that. I think that's great. Obviously, the food and beverage has become such a critical part of it, right? People are expecting to go to a game now and eat well. Nobody wants. I'm actually excited. Prudential Center this year. I'm going to the Devils game tonight. So tonight is not when you're going to be listening to this, but tonight when we record this, I'm going to go to the Devils game, and they just got a new F&B vendor, and I'll be eating my way around the stadium. So it's yeah, I think it is I love when teams make their players available. I went to the Savannah Bananas this summer, and when you walk into the stadium, the players are there greeting fans and signing autographs. Like I think that is attractive. I went to a Riveters game last year, and I know the Riveters no longer exist, but after the game, the players sign autographs for all the fans. It's about creating memories. That's what people remember. They don't remember who won the game. They remember meeting the players, and so. Yeah, I like things, I love the running on the bases on Sundays. I love the, last game of the season ticket holders draw on the ice, like memories.
Yeah.
That's what I like.
And why did it take so long, I guess, to think about the fan experience and to upgrade it and to think about how can we increase per caps? It seemed like for so long it was, buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jacks and a hot dog, and that's all you needed. And now we have, and certainly I'm sure the infusion of mobile and the increase of that, of Wi-Fi, but now we have everything from there's these huge ancillary businesses all built around fan experience, whether it's wait time or mobile ordering or mobile merchandise even, or ticketless entry, and like all these things that are now catering to the fan experience and also trying to increase game day revenue as well. Like first, I guess, why did it take so long to think about those things and to maximize all these game day revenue opportunities? And how have you seen these industries kind of blow up around it?
I think it's actually twofold. I think the conversation I think starts with attention, right? Like the idea being we had to do more, provide a better experience because there's more competition for the fan attention, fan dollar, right? That's where I think the conversation starts. But then the flip side of that is, as we talked about, the valuations and the costs of these teams have gotten so expensive to generate any semblance of return on them. We have to monetize them, right? So we need to do a better job than we have in the past. So I think it all goes together, but there's a broader trend of fans going less and spending more on those experiences, and again looking for like that premium experience. And so that's not where this conversation, or even like that the trend we're talking about, started about why they initially started trying to improve the fan experience. But it's all on the same kind of like wavelength, right? That's right now that's what fans are looking for. Like they're looking for that one night memorable, this is the night of the year type of experience, right? And that's why they're spending a couple grand to go to Taylor Swift, right? And that's it, it's all about like memories, Instagram, social, creating experiences like that stand out and are not just one of a million, which is what I guess it was back in the day when you went and it was just hamburger, hot dog, and Cracker Jacks.
Right. Yeah, I mean, in some ways, like you almost don't. The gate revenue is still important, and you still make whatever, a million, a couple million a game sometimes. But at the end of the day, it could just be a studio audience. I mean, because really the majority of the money's coming from the media rights deals, and so it's almost just like icing on the cake, I guess. And as you noted earlier about kind of the media rights deals being the explosion of the value of these assets, are we? Like, is there a paradigm shift coming where we're seeing obviously the dilution of these RSNs now? We're seeing the bundles come apart, but on the other side, we're seeing gambling. We're seeing Amazon and HBO Max and others that are entering the fray to bid on sports rights. So have we reached peak media rights values, or are the values just going to continue to go up and up, and we're going to see $10 billion teams in the near future?
Think from like I think media rights probably have flattened or close to peaked. I don't necessarily know that franchise values have though, because these end up being vanity plays. They're not like logical investments a lot of time. How many NFL teams come up every 5 years, and so yeah, at some point you probably run out of billionaires that it can spend $5 billion on an NFL franchise, but we haven't gotten there yet, and I don't anticipate that we will anytime in the imminent future. So sure, these valuations continue to go up,
and so we're going to kind of almost go back to the future where it may not be the best investment vehicle to get a huge return on your investment, but you have that vanity play and you have the exclusive club play where it will still the supply and demand will help continue to drive the asset values of these franchises, even if the media rights deals aren't going up and up and up by such percentages as they have in the last 10, 20 years.
That's where we're at now. But I mean, a lot of these teams don't make money. Not a lot, but a decent portion of pro sports teams in the U.S. don't make money. Not NFL teams aside. So even at $1 billion, I mean, would you spend $1 billion on something that lost money every single year? No, but you do because these valuations continue to go up because there's only 30 of them, and media rights have historically always gone up, and somebody will be willing to pay more than you paid.
Very true. Very true. So I want to shift it briefly here to kind of get in your head a little bit around like what drives what you cover for John Wall Street. Like, I'm sure it's a lot of conversations and trends that you see, but like what drives what you tend to write about, and what kind of trends have you seen emerge in the last couple of years that are particularly compelling?
I'm very intrigued by the potential investment of these sovereign funds in American sport. And as I guess tying that back to valuations, our valuation is going to continue to increase. If the sovereign funds are going to be investing, yes, for sure. So that's certainly a very interesting trend. The media rights stuff is fascinating. I'm not certain that regional sports networks are going away forever. I may get into a piece next week about how it could be a potential resurgence actually for regional sports networks if and when some of these teams that go to broadcast realize that they could utilize some of those rights fee revenues again, and that it's harder to piece together retrans fees and some of the other revenue sources that they're expecting from broadcast. So I'm not, I don't think the RSN model is necessarily dead. So yeah, I'm focused on media and everything that's going on in that space, and obviously everything in the investment landscape. But just generally speaking, I tend to look for things that are working in one aspect of the industry. When I started John Wall Street, one of the kind of overarching beliefs I had was that everybody's kind of like head down, working on their team or their league. Very little idea sharing within leagues. I mean, almost no idea sharing amongst leagues. So if I could identify things that would work for one property and convey that to many, like there would be a lot of value in that. So that's kind of one of the lenses that I try to look for stories, and then I also, I try to run counter in the sense that I'm totally uninterested in breaking news. If I break news, it's 100% by accident. There's no value in breaking news. It's so commoditized. Nobody will pay you for it. And the second you publish it, 1,000 other outlets have it. So there's no shelf life on it. I would rather take a big news story, something that everybody in the industry is talking about, and then put context around it and explain to you why it's important and why it matters. And people will read that today, and they'll read that for a week or maybe a month down the line because it still has relevance. And so I'm looking for things that the industry is talking about. So yesterday I wrote about the Coyotes moving to broadcast. I'm looking for trends. Barca Media, earlier this week I wrote about Barca Media spinning off their digital businesses. So I'm looking for things that people can learn from. And ultimately the goal is, can I make a really smart audience a little bit smarter each day? Like that's the lens that I'm looking through. And if I can, then I feel like I've done my job.
There's so many different avenues I want to go down here, Corey. But let's kind of think big picture here, and like, how are sports business leaders, whether it's owners or whoever, investment bankers, thinking about the sports business paradigm? Like, is it revenue per fan? Is it trying to reach the largest possible audience? Is it trying to super serve the fan that is willing to pay a large amount? I mean, we're seeing some stuff like, these interactive broadcasts, or like these gambling focused broadcasts, or analytics focused broadcasts, or these fans that are going to be the ones that are paying the $20 a month for their RSNs, direct fees. Like, how are they thinking about monetizing the fan? Is it still about having that direct relationship and maximizing that ARPU or RPF, whatever you want to call it, or is it just thinking about these other ways to monetize through sponsorships, through partnerships, and just more of that vanity metric and reaching the casual fan, even if they are not the super fan?
I think every league is still focused on, let me rephrase that. I think reach has become an increasing focus for sports properties, recognizing that everybody's not in the cable bundle anymore. There's like 35 million people that now are outside the pay TV bundle. So I think there's just an industry-wide focus on reach. I think there's an increasing shift to understanding or trying to understand, who fans are. And if you can understand who fans are, then you can start focusing on, well, what's the lifetime value and increasing the lifetime value of those fans are. So, we've seen these integration, an increased focus on data and data insights over the last couple of years, but we're still in our infancy, right? Like it's still almost at the data aggregation and understanding data part of the process. Like I don't know that we've actually gotten to the part of the process yet where it's actionable and driving new revenues, right? Like I think we're still in the early days of it. So I think that's where the long-term vision is, right? Is like, how do we know who these fans are, and then we talk about maximizing lifetime value of fans, which is what people talk about in other industries, but they don't talk about in the context of sports. That seems like the sweet spot, the end goal. And again, as we talk about valuations, these teams are valued, especially these teams with global followings, are valued significantly greater if you can put a per dollar value on what each of those fans are. The problem is right now is that, you say you got a gazillion fans, but you don't know who any of them are. How do you go about monetizing them? And the answer is you can't.
And that's a big thing, I think, too, looking at the NFL being just the behemoth that it is in the world. And yet, if you talk to the Liverpools or Manchester Uniteds of the world, they'll say, well, we have billions more fans of our team than the name your New York Jets or whatever, New York Giants, and yet like so these leagues are all trying to become these global leagues and have fans all around the world, but are these football clubs, soccer teams, I guess, still trying to figure out how to monetize those global fans, still trying to figure out how to effectively monetize the fans in China, the fans in India, the fans all around the world, so that they can basically, why are these Barcelonas, Manchester United not worth more than the Dallas Cowboys?
They haven't figured out how to monetize them. They've just figured out how to reach them. The European leagues have done a better job of putting their product. I mean, they were ahead of the American leagues in terms of marketing their products, putting people on the ground here in the U.S. And so bringing their products overseas before we were doing that stuff. Yeah, I don't know. The NFL, it's the behemoth. For me, again, it's all back to reach. All the games air on broadcast television, or almost all the games air on broadcast television. That's not the case in Europe. Even the Premier League games don't all air on television, which is insane. I mean, imagine not being able to see your home team's games in NFL. So the NFL is king, and largely because they air on broadcast, and the reach. So I think that's the large part of the equation. And then that's, I think, what everybody's trying to figure out now is as linear television, as there's fewer people inside this cable bundle, how do we maximize that reach? Is that reach because direct to consumer is not going to provide you that reach? And I have a story coming out next week or maybe the week after about is fast part of the equation? A lot of eyeballs there.
Free ad
support, right?
Of the acronyms. Is that the case though, where like the NFL had the business model figured out first before globalization? I mean, partly that's due to the sport, of course, that it's more of an American sport, whereas the Premier Leagues and La Ligas of the world may have figured out globalization before, and partly again due to the sport, but they just haven't, like to your point earlier, they haven't figured out how to monetize quite as effectively. So like, is it almost like what's going to happen first? Is the Premier League going to figure out how to monetize those global fans first, or is the NFL going to take over the world first, or put any wherever your American league is?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't really think about it in that context. I think the NFL is doing a good job though of marketing a sport that no one else plays. It's actually remarkable. I don't know if you saw the highlights, but like from those London games a few weeks ago, see people walk in the stadium, just people from all 32 teams. They're not there to see the game. Like they're just there because the NFL. It's almost like actually what the UFC has done, which I find remarkable every single time. They'll announce a pay-per-view and it sells out immediately. You don't even know who's fighting. It's just the brand is big enough that people show up. That's amazing.
No, it's a really
they're showing up at insane numbers too, like insane dollar amounts. Like the tickets are crazy expensive.
Yeah, to your point earlier, it's the spectacle, and to some degree, I guess it's a foreign experience, or at least a novel experience, I guess is the better way to put it. And you mentioned earlier too, a few more minutes left here with Corey Leff of JohnWallStreet. Before we get to the episode, shareable stat. I can pick your brain all day on this stuff, and we can go down so many rabbit holes, Corey. You mentioned earlier about just in the context of sports business, but really it's in the context of sports media in general, the diminishing value or the lack of value thereof of just of scoops, of breaking news. We all worship, there's a huge article recently about Shams Charania in New York Magazine, I believe. We all worship Woj and Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport. If you're a soccer fan, Fabrizio Romano. And yet, like, the sports media landscape has obviously been undergoing a lot of cuts in the last few years and consolidation. So I guess, like, what have you seen play out within sports media and the value of it, and especially as it pertains to news coverage? And are the Wojs and Schefters of the world really worth as much as the cultural cachet that they cover, and also frankly the salaries that they get paid?
Talking about two different things, right? When I talk about the limited value of breaking news, I'm talking in the context of sports business.
John Oran or Andrew Marchand might be breaking.
I mean, there's just limited breaking news. Do I need to know that so-and-so signed a new sponsorship deal with a team, or like even the biggest story, like XYZ buys the XYZ, right? Like, great. I'll hear that in 2 minutes when the team releases a press release. Like, no one's paying for that news. And frankly, no one knows who breaks that news unless you screw it up. Um, so you see these reporters, complaining about not getting credited from another news outlet. No fan knows that. No reader knows, and they don't care. It's such a losing proposition. It's when you talk about guys like Woj and Shams, they're serving a different audience. They're serving the consumer, the fan. Yeah, of course, the sports fan wants to know if their team picked up a player a second before another reporter. Like the fan, it's a different value prop. Also, by the way, the fan doesn't pay for that, right? They're getting that information for free on Twitter. Nobody's paying for the sports business news either.
Is that an issue? Like, how are we going to continue to I guess support these behemoths of sports media? Is ESPN going to be going? We'll talk about more about this later as well. Like, where is ESPN going? Where is the Athletic going? Is there a ceiling there? And also, not to mention, we can talk about the team supported news outlets and what Barca Media has and what all these internal team organizations have with these huge media outlets. Will fans want that? Will fans want more unadulterated news coverage that isn't supported by the team? Like, where do you see this, the value of sports media in general going on just day-to-day coverage, and then the interplay between team-based media and these third-party media outlets that have significantly lesser revenues than they may have had 10 years ago?
I mean, it's clear that the establishment is losing influence. When we were kids, I mean, ESPN was everything. And right now, you really only, I mean, I personally will only go to ESPN if they're airing a game that I want to watch, like live rights. So, the establishment has certainly, it doesn't hold the cachet that it once did. I think people in general are more open to niche media publications. I mean, there's a general mistrust of media. So of course these niche media publications are gaining influence. So yeah, I mean, I really think that niche publications focused on teams and leagues have tremendous opportunity and are really an exciting place. There's certainly room for team focused, team generated content, and there's certainly room for national media networks. There's room for everybody, but the consumer is definitely migrating away from the national, the athletic model, right, to local on the ground or like grassroots publications. Like that's just where they feel like it's legit.
And spending less time. I mean, I think our generation, you and me, I'm more than happy to click on a link to the Athletic and read a long form article. And I mean, a lot of other younger fans are too. But I mean, the at least the stereotype is that younger fans are just looking more for those quick bites. The 30-second TikTok video that gives you a 30-second explainer, 90-second explainer, whatever it might be. And so like this is part of a bigger picture conversation, I think, around long form consumption of sports content in general, watching full games as opposed to just consuming highlights and bite-sized clips. So like,
I don't necessarily subscribe to that idea, right?
On that.
Yeah, I think that younger generations will watch longer form content if the content is good. I think that's like I don't necessarily just believe that.
What about live games? 3 hour games, 2.5 hour games, whatever it might be, 4 hour college games.
I mean, there's no doubt that it's hard to fit that into people's schedules these days. I mean, everything's more competitive, so you have to make it more attractive. Look how much better baseball is because it's a 30-minute shorter product. It's so much more enjoyable, so much more watchable. I'm a huge college football fan. It's very hard to fit 4 hours into a day, to block out 4 hours. So that's not the reason they're not watching, in my opinion. I mean, if they're not watching full games, they're probably not watching full games because they don't have cable. That's, a bigger issue. They're watching YouTube. They're not watching television. Just different consumption habits. I don't, I think there are ways to serve the game. I mean, I certainly do not subscribe to the idea that the Gen Zs are not sports fans. I mean, that's a ludicrous idea. They're certainly sports fans. They just consume media in a different way.
And it goes without saying that highlights have become a bigger part of the picture, and digital and social driven highlights in particular. And
I
yet,
know this sounds stupid and anecdotal, but my daughter actually, who's 6 and is not a fanatical sports fan, but we were watching a game last night. She said, "Are they going to show the highlights of this?" We were watching the Devils game. She goes, "Are they going to show the highlights of this game in the Roblox app?" Because the YouTube Roblox, the NHL Roblox app has highlights, and I didn't know the answer to that. But like, if that's how kids are consuming NHL media, the night before's games, highlights should be in there. You know what I mean? That's like,
well,
this
that's the
seems like
question, though.
easy.
Will we get to the point where we can monetize those highlights as effectively as we monetize the live broadcast, which has generated so much money?
But even if you put the monetization to the side, isn't it about building that, at least as I see it, for a 6-year-old girl, it's building the next generation of fans and fan engagement. Why it she doesn't watch Sports Center like I did. I'm not sure that the 10-year-old or 12-year-olds are watching Sports Center, but they're flipping on Roblox. So why not have the highlights airing inside the Roblox game? They're already airing highlights in the game. Like,
Yeah.
that makes logical enough sense to me.
The question is being like, if that's the way that sports is consumed by the next generation of fans, can we monetize that fan the same way and to the same
But that's
degree?
not exclusive. I don't think. But is
Right.
that exclusive? Well, she watched the game with me too last night for the first period until she went to bed. Like, I don't think it's exclusive. It's part of the solution.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I guess like it's get the fan hooked, and we'll grow with them. We'll figure out how they want to consume as
Not an
they.
either or. It's not an either or. It's put content in as many places as possible, so we can reach as many fans and build fandom.
So it does start with building fandom and figuring out how to make money off those fans in the future. It's almost, I mean, I'm oversimplifying this, of course, but it's almost like the old Facebook model or VC model of let's get a bunch of users first, get them hooked on the platform, and then we'll figure out how to monetize a couple of years down the road.
I'm sure you can monetize, I'm sure you can monetize those people inside of, Roblox now with a whole bunch of digital products and such. But in the context that I'm talking about, at least, it's not about, and talking to the next generation of fans, you're not thinking about how to make the most money off of them today. You want to make sure that in 20 years, your team valuations are still going up because you still have a fan base.
That's definitely that's the bottom line right there. Like it's a good place for us right there. I want to have one more quick thing, Corey, before we get to the shareable stat. And I know I'm keeping you way too long here. But that is just the global nature of sports now. The fact that MLS obviously is on Apple, and anywhere around the world you can get your MLS games the same way, and everyone's trying to become the global sport. Premier League certainly, La Liga certainly, UFC is already kind of doing that a little bit. Like, is this the global nature of everything? Economies, news, just are we going to get to a place where is that going to be meaning that there's more sports leagues that can flourish, or are we going to get to a place where it's a little bit more consolidated and there are more not monocultures of sports, but the NFL is all of a sudden going to become not just the biggest sport in America, but the biggest sport in Europe and the biggest sport in Asia. Like, how do you see the global nature of this competing sports leagues for attention ending up at the end of the day?
Good question. We read a story not that long ago about like hypersonic air travel, and how that could influence sport. And I think the idea, particularly if you start talking about sovereign funds and international investment, and hypersonic air travel, I think it becomes clear that there's opportunities for like more Champions League or global sports properties, right? Like that seems all logical enough in terms of where we're headed. Particularly as we talk about, premiumization and pulling the best teams from around the world together for competitions. How great would it be to have a World Baseball Series where the best teams from Japan play, against the best team from a true World Series. So I think like that stuff is all likely and possible and probable. And I have a story actually coming out again in the next week or so, about the Americanization of Australian sport. You're seeing, I mean, everything from investment interest in there to U.S. sports properties going there to actual leagues over there embracing American models, like business models. So I'm a believer in that. Certainly, that you're going to see more of those properties, but that doesn't mean that there's less domestic leagues or less room for them. Like, I don't see any future where there's less leagues. All I can see is more properties popping up every day. Like literally every single day, I hear about a new sports league. So yes to more globalization, more international competition, all that kind of stuff. Yes, also to just more sport, more entertainment, more live entertainment.
Yeah, and I think it's okay for not every sports league to try to become a multi-billion-dollar sports league. Like if you are, if I'm going to use a maybe not the best example here, but like the Premier Lacrosse League, like they're not going to be as big as the NFL anytime soon. But they can become a viable business, just as much as another like emerging sports league or emerging sport, pickleball or name your emerging sport or whatever. And it's okay. Like you look at these esports valuations, of course, the last few years that were just so inflated, and not every sport needs to chase billion-dollar valuations, or is that the goal? Oftentimes, with are these pickleball leagues trying to eyeball we're going to be worth as much as an NBA team in 10, 15 years?
Pickleball is the bet is the participation. I mean, the idea being that in most countries in the world, participation correlates with fandom.
Right.
Like the most popular played sports are the most popular watched sports. That's the thing. It's not the case here in the US. But if you believe that pickleball is going to increase in participation here, then it's reasonable to believe that viewership and fandom will increase. I am more interested in the ecosystem around pickleball personally. The rating systems, the equipment, all that kind of stuff, and being able to control that, or being able to at least monetize that and tap into some of the monetization around that, than imagining a stadium full of pickleball fans.
Yeah.
But you're in the infancy. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. Like nobody went to NBA games in the 70s either. Like sometimes it just takes a while for this stuff to get going. MLS, like MLS is 25 years in now.
Mm-hmm.
Still feels like it's like same thing. WNBA, those leagues are 25 years old now, and they're first gaining like any semblance of momentum.
Yeah, it still kind of feel like challenger leagues. I like your point too about just the ecosystem that can blow up around these sports. That you have all these ancillary, related businesses that can pop up around them and that create a whole new ecosystem that way and revenue that way. Last thing for you, Corey, before we get to the terrible stat, I do want to just touch on the business of JohnWallStreet. Like where you see JohnWallStreet brand going. Are these sports focused VCs and investment firms starting to have a higher demand for the kind of content you're producing, or are they trying to do things more in-house and keep things closer to the vest to try to make sure that the insights are not getting out there to other competing investment firms? Like where do you want JWS to go, and how are you seeing the current readership, I guess, or at least the investors, the financial backers, getting their information and trying to get it in a way that feels proprietary to them?
In terms of where we're going, we're building out a consulting and events business. We're thinking about events in a very high-end, curated, invite-only kind of context most of the time. Because again, those events are designed to really drive our consulting business. And consulting means a lot of different things. It could mean, project-based consulting on a media rights deal, but it also could mean market research. It could mean, white label newsletter creation. It can mean all sorts of different things. So I think, ultimately it's driven by the influence of the newsletter. So the newsletter drives the consulting and events business. In terms of where the focus goes. I think that we continue to spend a lot of time on trends and things that are working within the landscape, and of course the big the big topics, if you will. I'd like to increasingly play more in the investment space. I don't think I do enough, particularly in the early stage investment space. For two reasons. One being that those companies don't generate a ton of coverage elsewhere. So like it's a real differentiator for JohnWallStreet. Usually, your Bloombergs and Wall Street Journals of the world aren't covering companies until they're, half unicorns or bigger. So there's an opportunity there. I'm also increasingly playing more in the early stage space, setting up a lot of road shows for startups and such. That fits in nicely with, again, part of the consulting business. So I'd like to see, I'd like to do more coverage. I don't think there's like the feeling of like, should we not talk because we don't want our secrets getting out? I think it's actually just the opposite. Particularly on the early stage, most of these funds are investing alongside along one another. It's not real competitive like it is on the late stage side. Late stage investment is a little bit different. It's much more competitive. Particularly on the early side, these companies, these investors are eager to explain, why they back these companies and why they think these are cool companies and are going to do something big, and try to put these companies on the radar of people that matter. So, no, I'm not finding any semblance of pushback as it relates to talking about investment or why smart money is doing what it's doing.
That's good insight for sure, and love hearing the plans about JohnWallStreet. Continue to read it every day, and definitely want to continue to learn from you as well. And we will have some more fun with you, Corey, in our quick take segment of first episode's shareable stat coming up right now. So good being able to pick the brain of Corey Leff, founder and editor of JohnWallStreet. As you can see, there's a reason why his newsletter is so awesome. He knows his stuff, can talk intelligently about a number of areas in the sports business space. Really, really cool to go down those rabbit holes and learn about the big trends in the sports business industry today. And we'll have some more fun coming up with Corey. So stick around for our quick hitting questions. But first, this episode's shareable stat. This episode's shareable stat is about LinkedIn, and it was shared by LinkedIn. So you can take that for what you will. And they shared recently that they have reached the 1 billion total users mark. A hell of a milestone for LinkedIn, which has been around for a while. Some people are going there more now with the fall of Twitter to some degree in the Elon Musk era, and they have reached 1 billion total users. So what does that mean for the sports industry? Well, for several years, we've kind of talked about LinkedIn of what could we do there in the sports business space. And you've seen teams over the years put together packages that are designed for business folks. Get tickets plus a golf outing, and they tie in a partner that way. Or you talk about the hospitality and premium hospitality opportunities to go and wine and dine a client in the premium suites or premium packages. But what else could we do now? 1 billion total users, LinkedIn is going strong, and they are starting to cater more and really foster more of a creator economy or creator space there as well. What can you do as a team beyond what we just talked about? Could you target your partnerships team a little bit more and try to attract more sponsorship prospects? Maybe lean into the creator aspect and turn your partnership sales and partnership marketing team into creators almost. Have them share what are some of the creative things that your sponsorships are doing in-game, out of home, etc. Showcase some of those cool activations, some of those really awesome digital and social activations, even case studies as well that can take that route. Or maybe you lean into your group sales a little bit and get your group sales reps to showcase kind of behind the scenes of what's happening with a group and some of the various group outings that your team is fostering right now. Or maybe you go into the entertainment side of things and go that route. Or your social media team talking about their strategy and really speaking about what they're doing, why they're doing it across platforms, and turning into a thought leader in that sense and all the value that can bring. There are so many different avenues you can take, whether it's empowering your individuals that work for the team or work for the league, or targeting the prospects on there and speaking on behalf of your organization. Especially as sports teams become more and more sophisticated in the sports business space. A lot of them are owned. There are multi-club ownerships, as we heard a little bit about in the interview with Corey. So there's lots of opportunities there as LinkedIn continues to grow. Again, now hitting 1 billion total users. That's the shareable stat. Lots to think about. Ponder it, discuss it, But more importantly, stick around because you're going to learn some more and have some fun with Corey Leff of JohnWallStreet. Right back from this episode's shareable stat, and I'm joined once again by Corey Leff. He is the founder and editor of JohnWallStreet. Corey, learned so much from you in our interview segment. Are you now ready for some quick takes?
Let's make it happen.
Let's see what you got. All right, number one, the sport or sports league whose stock you most want to buy today and hold for the next 5 or 10 years. And then also the opposite. Which one would you least want to buy and hold?
Sports property today, or how limited am I in my choices here? Is Big Four? What am I talking? How wide am I able to go here?
Spectrum is as wide as you want to go.
Sports property that I would buy today. It's a good question. I don't know. Well, I don't know. What's a good league? Let me think. I don't know. I like what PFL's doing. I think they're, you got at least, I think you got another $1 billion MMA company coming there. So yeah, I'll say that, super bullish on a second winner in mixed martial arts for sure. At least excited about. Gosh, I don't know. Who do I not want to,
Don't want to piss you off.
I'm trying to think. I don't know. I would be hesitant to invest at the levels that the MLS teams are being purchased at today, I will say. Those teams will probably continue to climb for the same reasons we spoke about before, but the underlying business case, the revenues that are generated relative to the valuations are just absurd. And relative to other opportunities in the US, I would say they would rank on the less attractive, in my opinion.
Very valid. And I love the PFL response too. I think, we didn't get into it in the interview part, but combat sports are so easy to cross borders because everyone understands, guy hits each other, guys hit each other, guy falls down. That's the guy that loses.
I think boxing has, we have talked about it forever, roll up boxing. Just in general, I think boxing is so undervalued. I'm a big boxing fan, and for the same reasons that you just cited, the sport should be bigger. Yes, I would like to see the sport have a resurgence.
One to keep on. All right, number two, this one might be just as hard. Which individual will have the most influence over sports business in the next 10 years?
That's a good question too. Which individual? Is that athlete or just anyone?
It could be anyone. I think the easy answer, the cop out, would just be Michael Rubin, maybe. But
I was actually going to go down. I was going to say Ari Emanuel. But because I don't think they're done buying stuff, right? But yeah, I can see the Michael Rubin argument. I'll buy the Michael Rubin argument.
I will accept Ari as an answer, or Michael Rubin. I think both are definitely very valid, and I'm sure there's others as well that could vie for that potentially. Number three for you, Corey. Tell me the fan experience or fan engagement area that is most intriguing to you right now, and why.
Engagement area that's most intriguing.
NFTs.
I don't know if it's most intriguing. I don't know if it's most intriguing. I think the most important one that hasn't been addressed is entry into the stadium. It still takes way too long to get into a sports facility. And the weather's not often good in the winter, or it's raining and you're standing outside, and there's technology that exists to walk in and not have to be patted down. I am not sure why every stadium doesn't have that at this point.
Yeah, and we're starting to see some stadiums adopt Clear, right, and those kind of solutions.
The other thing is Wi-Fi, actually. That is the most frustrating, least understandable consumer experience problem that I encounter. I forget where I was recently. I was at a game recently. I couldn't post. There was no internet. Beyond comprehension that a sports facility would not have the Wi-Fi needed to allow fans to post there. Super frustrating.
Yeah, that feels like table stakes these days for sure. Number four. These questions are too much fun. I'm glad I wrote these. Number four. Where, when I say where, what medium, I guess, or what station, if you're thinking about TV, where will we be watching the Super Bowl in the year 2040?
I'm still going to bet, I'm still betting linear broadcast.
Broadcast. All
I'm
right.
still saying CBS, NBC, Fox is still the heavy favorite.
So there we go. We'll have like Kevin Burkhardt and Tom Brady calling the game or something.
Likely.
All right, number 5, and we'll see that when that shifts. I mean, I chose the year 2040 was an interesting decision of when to choose. I would have said
2030 is a lock. I mean, 2030 is guaranteed. I would put everything I own on 2030.
yeah,
So yeah, you have to go at least
2040 a little bit further out. If I would have said
yeah.
2080, who knows? Number 5, tell me which do you call the most innovative team or league right now, and why? Team or league, whichever one stands out the most for you.
Innovative team or league. Who's doing cool stuff? 12. Brett Yormark, my new conference,
Hell yeah.
is doing everything. Trying everything. I mean, they're doing a great job at innovation and trying different things. Love what the Big 12 is doing.
Yeah, I think everyone is definitely applauding that as a great hire, and he's already been making splashes from day one. All right, number 6. This is gonna put you put your fan hat on now. You're old school, just old Joe Smith fan. The most memorable game you've attended, and also if it's different, the most memorable game you've ever watched, where on TV or something. The most memorable game for whatever.
This is a very this is a hard question because I'm a Jeff fan and I was at like the fake spike. Is that the most? I was at the butt fumble. Like are those the most memorable? I mean, those are the most famous. The best game I've ever been at. Gosh, I don't know. Been at 3 remarkable college football games in like the last few years that have. But I mean, they're not like these aren't like the most famous games. But I was at a Florida Tennessee game that ended on a Hail Mary. I was at the Texas A&M game where they beat Bama a couple of years ago. The first time the Saban assistant had beat Saban, an unranked, and also I think the first time an unranked team had beaten Saban. I don't know, like most memorable game I've ever been to.
And those are some good ones there. But yeah, it's most memorable for you. It doesn't have to be
the Jets. Honestly, the Jets opener this year is pretty damn memorable. Rodgers got hurt. They won on a punt return. I mean, pretty memorable. I'm also partial to as an Arizona Wildcats fan. They shut out Miami in the Fiesta Bowl. There's been some great memories along the way. The 98 Holiday Bowl. So there's a few personal games too that matter.
Love it. That's some great ones you get to call out there. All right, we're gonna get to a tough one here as we get down here with Corey Leff of JohnWallStreet. What will eventually stop sports leagues or team valuations from continually going up forever? Or will new revenue streams just keep arising for the rest of the future? Or like we talked about, just the supply and demand that they're going to keep going up forever. Like, what will stop them from going up, or will they just keep going up at least for the rest of our lifetimes?
Hard to suggest that they're going to stop going up. I mean, it's hard to suggest that there's not going to be new and emerging media platforms, technologies, ways to monetize the fans. So it's crazy to suggest that we've capped anything out. And I don't see the demand for live entertainment stopping anytime soon. I have a hard time believing that sports is not going to be just as popular in 100 years as it is today. And so I have a very hard time believing that those teams aren't going to be significantly more valuable in 100 years than they are today. I would bet on sports.
I like it. That's good. It's good for me. We all love sports business here, so let's keep those values going up. All right, number 8. This is a good one here. Tell me, go back to your hometown, the best meal to get and where to get it. We have to indulge our foodie audience here on the podcast.
Not like I'm from Livingston, New Jersey. There used to be a restaurant in Livingston called Stretches. When I think I once ran into Darrelle Revis at Stretches when he was playing for the Jets. The restaurant has since closed, but they have like a dish, a chicken Savoy dish, which is like legendary. It's called like Stretches Chicken in a lot of places. And it's sold at a store called Mara's in Roseland, which I frequently visit to get specifically that dish. So that is like a very local thing. I'm a big fan of Livingston Bagel, although it's certainly not what it once was. Calabria's Pizza, while Dave Portnoy rated it an 8.9, I won't say it's a legit 8.9, but a very good slice for a hometown slice. It's okay. There's a couple spots I still go to.
I guess while we're on food, a little bonus stuff follow up. Taylor ham or pork roll?
From North Jersey, of course it's Taylor ham.
I had to check. All right. Taylor ham it is. I know it's a
Yeah.
divisive subject for some people.
Oh yeah, I lived on Taylor ham, egg, and cheese. I think I had it every single day for 4 years in high school.
Hell yeah, that is a good meal. I will second that for sure. Number 9, we're coming down the wire here. The most important lesson or learning from your time producing John Wall Street. What have you learned?
I think I mean just the value of putting out content. I forgot who I was. Very early on in John Wall Street, I was talked to a class at Columbia. I don't remember who's the professor was. It might have been Chris Linchesky's class. Might have been Stephen Masters' class. I don't remember exactly whose class it was, but they had said something that like had really struck home with me. And like, you had all these kids that were like grad students at Columbia that were like looking to break into sports, and these kids all think that they went to a great undergrad, they're going to like this great grad school, and they're going to like fall into a sports job. And the truth is that they're probably not, because there's a million other kids just like them. The guy who's going to get the job is the guy who's cranking out content in his basement, that's building a fan base and an audience and a platform. Like that's the team. Excuse me, that's the guy a team or a league wants to hire. And that actually brings real value. So I'm not saying there isn't that going down the grad's path is wrong or anything. I'm just suggesting that putting out content is a phenomenal way to get discovered. It is a living resume. And if you want to work in sports and you think you know what you're talking about, and you have an expertise in a specific area, drill down on that. And there's riches and niches, as they say, right?
Yeah. Great advice, and advice that I like to give to others as well. On just get out there and start creating content, show what you know and show what you can do. All right, last one for you here, Corey. This is a quick one. Who will own ESPN in 10 years?
Gosh, that's a good question. I don't know.
Quick,
who's going to own ESPN in 10 years? Probably not Disney. I don't know, but I think you're trying to get me to say, Amazon or something like that. And I'm not biting. I don't know who's buying them, but I'm not biting on what you're selling here.
So we're gonna let you plead the fifth here. Is that what we're gonna?
I don't know. I don't know. Can the company exist as a standalone? I don't know.
Time will tell. All right, we'll let you off the hook, but definitely a challenging one to end on, a challenging question to end on.
Sure.
And now your chance, though, Corey, to take over the podcast for me for a moment and tell us here. If people don't know, I don't know if you still do it, but John Wall Street used to do a great list of the best follows in sports business, I think top 50 at one point. I would love you guys to get it back going again. If you, I think you guys still do it. Maybe not.
We didn't do it last year, but I think I'll bring it back for this year. It was just in the move. It was last year was tough at the end of the year, but I am keen to bring it back. It is great to be able to shine a spotlight on some people that aren't necessarily getting a huge follow. My favorite Twitter follow is Bob Thompson. Bob Thompson is the single best addition to Twitter in like the last 2 years. Former president of Fox Sports Networks, is active and engaging, and will really kind of give people an understanding as to the RSN ecosystem and the paid media ecosystem. Really smart guy, who's investing way more time and energy into the platform than he probably should. But any of us who consume Twitter, as I do, should be really thankful for it. He's a wealth of information.
Oh yeah, a good one there. And how about you, Corey? Where do you want to direct people to follow all things John Wall Street, and of course subscribe to the newsletter?
You can check me out. I'm at JohnWallStreet.com. If you go there and get a error or something, we're in the process of migrating sites, but we are at JohnWallStreet.com. My Twitter handle is at Howie Longshort. My LinkedIn is under John Wall Street, so you can find me there. JWS at JohnWallStreet.com is my email. Feel free to reach out, but always here to be a resource and to help and yeah, just be a positive influence here.
Hell yeah. If you're listening to this podcast right now, you should definitely be subscribed to the John Wall Street newsletter. Just such a tremendous resource for sports business. And I cannot recommend it enough. But thanks so much for coming on the podcast today, Corey. I really enjoyed picking your brain and learning from you.
My pleasure, dude. Thanks for having me.
What a great conversation, interview, and podcast episode. Being able to speak to the founder and editor of John Wall Street, Corey Leff, although I just think of him as John Wall Street oftentimes. Just so much good stuff, so much insight, and it really get your wheels turning in your head. Get you thinking about some of the bigger trends and how you can look at the sports business space from what's really happening, what's coming down the pipeline, what should we be looking out for in the future, what should we be thinking about now, today as well. Just lots of good stuff, and cannot thank Corey enough for coming on the podcast today, and look forward to seeing him in my inbox. Hope you do too. Subscribe to John Wall Street because you will be smarter every day in the sports business space if you do. But that'll do it for this episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. Thanks again for listening. As always, I'm your host, Neil Horowitz. You can find me on LinkedIn, where I post more content, on Twitter at NJH287, the website, dsmsports.net. Go ahead and visit me there. You can also contact me there. And, of course, follow along, subscribe to the podcast on your preferred podcast platform. Until next time, this is Neil Horowitz signing off for the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast.